I just had a horrific encounter with a famous woke comedian. I want to talk about Jordan Peterson, Cathy Newman, and what you can't say to BBC comedians.
You cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like, you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
So you haven't sat there and... I'm just trying to work that out. I mean...
Ha, gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head.
The 2018 interview is one of the most infamous moments in recent TV history, a rare example of airtime for an alternative media figure who, with logic and inquisitiveness, this is Jordan Peterson I'm talking about, ran rings around an established mainstream media figure. It's no coincidence that the news stations tightened their grip around that time. Aside from the occasional appearance from Elon Musk or Konstantin Kisin, the next 6 years saw UK TV channels batten down the hatches to reinforce groupthink magic and new incarnation of postmodernism disseminated by academia and Hollywood. Before turning to the culture wars, a reductive but helpful term for the fight between reality and woo-woo, I was an authority on cults, from Scientology and NXIVM to Heaven's Gate and Jonestown. So it has been no surprise that Peterson's destruction of Newman's cult think has had no effect on its true believers. Just as Scientology engages in fair gaming and no contact with so-called suppressive persons on the outside, legacy media went about destroying reputations and closing the gates to wrong thinkers such as Peterson. To give you an idea of how far we've fallen, take the shocking response to my video with Dr. Emma Hilton on X from a member of the celebrity establishment, comedian Rufus Hound. The celebrity, who has close to 1 million followers, had claimed without evidence or reason that male boxer Imane Khelif is female. A follower of mine who goes by Calamity Jane posted quite reasonably, "Maybe you should watch Andrew Gold interview the fabulous Fond of Beatles," that's Dr. Emma Hilton's Twitter account or X account, "instead of hurling insults at people in capital letters on X." Here is Rufus Hound's response. "Maybe you should go boil your head, you handmaiden." Now, this aggressive social media post lies firmly in the remit of Keir Starmer's strict policy of arresting threatening social media posters. It's incitement to violence. It is also a gender-based hate crime deliberately conjuring up imagery of witches and women in servitude. He should be getting a visit from the police, although that in itself is ridiculous and authoritarian. Where have I seen this kind of unwarranted vitriol before? Where do you find such outrageous elevation of language and tone to reasonable lines of inquiry? Scientology, for a start. Emma Hilton replied, "Hello Rufus, I'm the developmental biologist in that podcast. I'd be happy to talk you through the scientific and medical understanding of male advantage and what that means for sports." She had the good grace to reply with a scientific olive branch, the kind that I've seen offered countless times by those trying to de-radicalise Scientologists. My good friend, former Scientologist Aaron Smith-Levin, constantly tells me that nothing on the outside could have convinced him that the doctrine was bull. So it's again no surprise that Rufus Hound, ignored Dr. Hilton. No debate with outsiders. It's frightening how we've gone from an interviewer in 2018 admitting she was schooled in the importance of free speech, Cathy Newman, to a mainstream comedian in 2024, 6 years later, screeching that a woman boil her head for suggesting we look at the science. This reeks of a legacy media class so used to getting their own way that they cannot even imagine that those on the outside of their nepotistic, incestuous cult could have anything sensible or intelligent to offer. Years of status quo and fear of offence has given celebrities and their leftist audiences carte blanche to tear apart science-backed dissenters with grave physical threats while still feeling every inch The Good Guys TM. My good friend and fellow podcaster, Tangentially Speaking with Chris Ryan, well, his name's Chris Ryan, that's his podcast, though, recently sent me an excellent 2004 article, so we are just repeating history, aren't we, by Paul Graham about the nature of taboo, called What You Can't Say. He argues that morality and offence are simply fashions sparked by universities and celebrities. That sounds familiar 20 years later, doesn't it? He writes, "It seems to be a constant throughout history. In every period, people believed things that were just ridiculous, and believed them so strongly that you would have gotten in terrible trouble for saying otherwise." What's interesting to me is the antidote. Amanda Montell wrote in Cultish that the best way to handle the concern that you might be in a cult isn't to leave the cult. It's to join many cults. Similarly, when it comes to taboos, Graham suggests life experience and encountering other cultures. He writes, "Imagine a kind of latter-day Conrad," that's Joseph Conrad who wrote Heart of Darkness, character who has worked for a time as a mercenary in Africa, for a time as a doctor in Nepal, for a time as the manager of a nightclub in Miami. The specifics don't matter, just someone who has seen a lot. Now imagine comparing what's inside this guy's head with what's inside the head of a well-behaved 16-year-old girl from the suburbs. What does he think that would shock her? He knows the world. She knows, or at least embodies, present taboos. Subtract one from the other, and the result is what we can't say. This is something I see labelled at the so-called far right, most of whom are moderates experienced enough for taboo to hold less sway. That's not to say there isn't a very horrible contingent of far-right people who are just a bunch of racists, but I do think the idea of far-right in general is very much exaggerated. Many of these are people who just don't accept this taboo culture. When the BBC commentators celebrate a man beating up women in boxing, this far-right or just experienced people who have experienced other taboos see this for the ridiculous fashion that it is. I spent 13 years living in France, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, and Germany, learning to speak 5 languages to ingratiate myself with their cultures. I can't tell you how ridiculous it feels, after all that time abroad, to return to find Britain and the West have lost their understanding of biological reality. One of my recent podcast guests, Alex Phillips, is controversial in how she talks about issues with Islam and mass immigration, precisely because her tolerance for taboo has broadened by living in Africa. She told me on the podcast how she ingrained herself in several Muslim countries and made many friends in these distant lands. When I look at Rufus Hound, the comedian who said those horrible things about boiling a head, I see a person utterly committed to one idea and one tribe, no life experience. For example, he came through the ultra-woke Edinburgh Festival. He was a panellist on all the right topical TV shows and even appeared in Doctor Who. This is like the Tom Cruise level of Scientology for the cult of woke. He was last seen doing panto. Non-Brits don't look up what panto is. He delved into the realms of conspiracy, which is apparently okay if you're on the BBC and if you're on the left. He claimed the Manchester Arena bombing, where a terrorist killed 22 people, was a false flag attack to help the Tories win the election. As a true cultist, he'd rather believe anything, no matter how implausible, so long as it doesn't interfere with his woke ideals of multiculturalism. This is not a man interested in other cultures, ideas, or the promotion of free speech. He is, to use Graham's analogy, the 16-year-old girl from the suburbs. Most gallingly, he will no doubt see himself as the opposite, an open-minded progressive man of the world, who sends misogynist death threats to women who show polite and informed concern for women beaten up by men. But it's the bogeyman of Jordan Peterson that we must fear, lest his words offend. I wrote this on my Substack. It's andrewgoldheretics.com, and weeks or months later, I put them out on YouTube. But if you want to join the 18,000 fellow heretics who have signed up, go to andrewgoldheretics.com and sign up there. Keep watching this channel and hit that like button. I think it really helps this video to get out there, and that's what we all want, isn't it? 91% watching Heretics clips are not subscribed. Quick favour, hit subscribe. Free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us question everything together.